Welcome to Nomad PHP Lightning Talks. I'm Joe Ferguson. Nomad PHP Lightning Talks are a 10-minute talk that give a high-level overview or an in-depth look at a small portion of a PHP-related topic. Lightning Talks are a great way for new speakers to build their speaking resume or for long-time speakers to test drive new talk ideas. Right now we have Ian Littman talking about PHP 7.1 in 10 minutes. Make sure you join us in March for Nomad PHP, and you'll see Ian do a full-hour Nomad session called Yielding Higher Performance PHP Applications. Please make sure you visit Join In after the talk and give Ian some feedback. Ian, take it away.
Okay, so PHP 7.1 is hot off the presses, and I figured that I'd go through a list of features and backward compatibility gotcha or two, and just explain why you want to be running it on your at least dev workloads and probably production sooner rather than later. The link that I have up on screen there is a link to these slides, so you can follow along if you like. And without further ado, so first things first, how do you get PHP 7.1 actually installed? Well, that depends on the distribution or operating system that you're using. My preference for CentOS or Amazon Linux or Red Hat or Fedora-based stuff would be the Remy repo. He tends to release stuff about the time that it's tagged on GitHub, and or you can use the IUS repo. It looks like they have PHP 7.1 as of pretty recently. If you're on Ubuntu or a Debian-based OS, the Andre J repo or Andrej repo is solid for that. If you're using .dev, they don't have PHP 7.1 quite yet. I'm guessing they'll have that relatively soon. If you're on macOS, well, Brew got 7.1 a couple days after it was released. They were release candidates before then. Works just fine. That's actually the way I'll be showing my examples. And Leap has binaries as well that you can pull down, curling into bash as one does, if you want an alternate way of pulling down the latest and greatest runtime. Finally, if you're on Windows, well, you can just pull down the Windows PHP downloads. So, first off, we've got Nullable Types. You can type hint against an object or a scalar and say, require this, but allow null. So here I've got something that it maybe returns an object or something for a repo and might return an object back, or if I give it null as the ID, which again is required, it's not like the old int ID equals null type hint that you would be able to do a zero argument version of get. This one, it's required, but you could do it as either an integer or null, and it would return either a myObject or null. So let's look at an example of this. So we've got, let's first look at our kind of base here. So I was very creative with the names of the value object in the repo here, but here we've got this get method that requires an ID and may or may not return an item. It just depends on whether we have it or not. And this is, it will actually check, and the only thing that you're allowed to return is either an item or null. Likewise, you can parameter type hint with nullable. So in this case, it's probably not the best syntax here, because we really, what we're trying to do is either search for a subset of items based on name, or we're trying to just say, hey, give us the whole set. But in this case, I'll always have to provide something as this first argument. So let's go ahead and declare our item repo down here, throw some stuff in it, because we're doing this nice little place setting here. And if we look here, we'll try a few different things. First, we'll get item 1. We have that. We don't have this one. We'll search for an item, and that'll give us array length 2. We'll search for null, and that'll give us the entire thing because I write bad code like that. And finally, we'll do a search with no parameters and see what that does. So what we've got here is, as expected, we get something with the object with an ID, or with a name there. We get null because we're allowed to pass back null or an item, but only null or an item or a subclass thereof. Our search returned 2 forks, so we're good there. Our search with the null as the parameter returned everything. And then we've got this. So this is actually a bit of a new thing. So in PHP 7.1, instead of getting a warning when you have too few arguments going into your method call or function call, it will throw an error now. You can catch it, but if you have potentially misbehaving code previously where you were just silencing warnings and such, that's no longer an option. You actually have to do something to clean up your code here. Again, it's a warning level issue. It's not like all of a sudden something went from a notice to an exception, but this is one backward compatibility break that you might experience. Hopefully, though, your code isn't behaving in this anti-pattern, and you can just upgrade with no side effects. So, second feature, class constant visibility. So now you can go in to a class, and in this case, my object or extensions of my object will have access to this secret constant. But if you try to access that constant anywhere else, rather than having access to it from anywhere else, like you would with the standard const keyword, it will throw an error, which we'll see in just a second. You can continue to use const without the visibility modifier, just like you can use function without the visibility modifier, and it will default to public visibility. But now you can use protected and private to have constants to pull your magic numbers out of code that you can't just pull from anywhere else in the application. So, if we look here, I went ahead and extended that existing repo with a few more things, namely constants. So this one is public visibility, as is this one. And, well, from the outside, there is no spoon. So I go ahead and grab stuff from the old repo, put it into the new one, and let's see what happens when we search with each of these constants. So we've got this here, as we expect. And we've got this here, which was, as you can recall, declared as a public const. And we get a really helpful email, or a really helpful error here, saying you declared this constant as protected. It's there, but we're not going to let you use it. So you should fix that. Next, you have void return types, where while the language itself will actually return null in these cases, you aren't allowed to return anything specific in a method that you declare as a return type of void. So you can still use your return keyword if you want to do an early return in your method, but if you are expecting to have behavior that doesn't return, you can make PHP fatal if you forget about what you were trying to do and return something anyway. So we look here, and it looks like I have a bug here. We can see that in action in just a second. What I wanted to do is print all and have my print all actually echo within the class, because we love side effects on our functions. And here's what happens when we run my errored code. Immediately we get a fatal error saying that a void function must not return a value. So we look back and say, oh, well, I see what the problem is. Swap the return for an echo, save, and run it again. Now, one thing to notice here is at the end there, you're seeing a null at the end of the list because I've var dumped the output of that function. So the runtime is implicitly returning a null just as it would on any other function that doesn't return. The void return type is only a check to make sure you aren't unnecessarily throwing things where they shouldn't be. But the behavior of the runtime otherwise is the same as it's always been. And now we have short list syntax. So we did this with array back in 5.4, and now list is getting the same treatment. There are a few fun things you can do here. This is the equivalent to list ABC. And likewise, this is the equivalent to list first second. So in this case, you have an array of arrays length 2 or higher, and this for each loop will drop the first and second values right into $first and $second. There's also the ability to, up here, at the very least, pull destructure by index, which we'll see in the example I'm about to show you. So in this case, we're just going to use our base repo because that's all we need here. But I'm going to pull this search into a couple of variables rather than getting an array back. And here's one interesting thing. We can actually, in this case, this is going to give us an array length of 4. And I can specify in the array destructuring syntax here that I want the item at index 3 and throw that into third item, rather than having to do something like null, third item. This also works on, and is a lot more useful on string keys. So if we run that, we'll see that we've got one of our forks as expected, and the third item, the fourth item in that function return, which is a knife. And now we get to iterables. It's not iterator, so you can't take a drink of your favorite beverage yet. What the iterable pseudo-type does is basically say, this function, all it really needs to do is to be able to for each over the parameter that we're passing in. You can also use this as a return type. And with that, you can now type hint against both arrays, which you were able to do before, and traversables. So it's a kind of primitive, very specific case of, you say, algebraic types or something to that effect. There's like array and traversable. Normally you can't type hint against those, but well, now you can. As an example, we extend our same repo again. And this time I say, oh, well, I want to be able to add items to it. But I want to add an array of items or something that for each is like an array. I don't really care as long as the collection behaves as I expect it to. So go ahead and type hint as iterable, add items here. Of course, this would work without the type hint, but by being more specific in our code, we're chasing down potentials of errors before they happen. So go ahead and instantiate that class, have an array iterator, which again is not an array. So if I type it up here as an array, it would not work. And I have an array down here, which likewise, if I type in it as traversable, this would not work. But as we'll see momentarily, both work. You can see there we've got the cup and the placemat were successfully imported, so we were able to pull them out just fine. Also, you can now, there's one place so far that you can do algebraic types in PHP 7, and that, well, in 7.1 anyway, and that is in catching exceptions. So if you can't revise your exception tree catching, or if you have a really long catch block and you really don't want to duplicate that for two different types of exceptions that, again, you can't necessarily catch properly with a single exception type, then this will let you make that catch of two exceptions across different trees. So if we look here, we've got a revised version of the search method that throws an invalid argument exception, which is actually a logic exception, if we put in soup. And if we don't have anything there, then we decide we're going to throw a nothing matches that term out of bounds exception, which is a runtime exception. So these are very different on the hierarchy of kind of standard library exceptions. So normally you can't just say, oh, well, I'm just going to catch these two. What you would have to do is catch \exception, and you probably don't want to go all the way up that tree. So what I expect to happen here is we'll see the search come through for the spoon, because that's in the system and it's not soup, but we can catch either one of these exceptions, which it seems a little trivial right now, but if we had a, again, large catch block, then this would be a really useful feature. And we'll just go ahead and output the message. See that in action? Oh, we've got no soup for you, we've got nothing matches that term, and we've got the spoon. We also have this closure from callable method here. This is, again, a 7.1 specific feature that lets you take the various string and array forms of telling PHP what function to call, say, no matter what you give me here, I want to get a closure out of it, which will give you the benefits of how you can bind closures and that sort of thing. So the example that PHP documentation uses for this is exposing a protected or private method as a closure. You can do kind of fun object gymnastics and functional gymnastics as a result of this, and you can then type in against closure in places where you would normally type in as against callable. So let's see kind of a tortured example of what that looks like. So in this case, we're actually going to use higher order functions to patch the fact that it's kind of silly that the search method on our base repository, you have to pass in the literal value null in order to get the result set for everything. So here, we actually use the old style of it. This is not a nullable, this is just a default parameter. Go ahead and then pass that down to whichever closure we add in. And up here, we tell this searches closure function, hey, package up my search method as a closure so you can do closure-y things on it. Then you go down here, say, okay, pull that package closure out, wrap it in this default null closure, and execute it and see if we fixed our little idiosyncrasy where passing no parameters would fail, but passing null would succeed. And hey, look, it does. So there are a number of additional features in 7.1. Could do a presentation on signal handling. I believe Cal has a book on the old kind of way of doing that, but we've got async process control handling here rather than using ticks to do that. HTTP to server push support in curl. It's yet another curl constant. Davey Shafik has a few HTTP2 related presentations. The one that he did at Pacific Northwest PHP actually mentions how you would use server push, I believe, in 7.1. If not, I believe he was the one who pushed this, so you can bug him about that. Authenticated encryption in OpenSSL, and that is where you have both an encrypted payload and like HMAC style hash on top of that to verify that your data hasn't been tampered with in its encrypted state. So that was available in OpenSSL, but PHP for the longest time hasn't had those methods exposed, or those algorithms exposed, and this is fixing that. And there are a bunch of new places where negative string offsets actually work now. You can, for example, if you have a string and a variable, you can now do variable or $variable bracket -1 close bracket, and that'll get you the last character in the string. There are a few other places in the system where that behavior is now available where it wasn't before, and it's if you've used Python, for example, prior, you're probably very used to that. There's no range support quite yet for arrays, for example, but we're moving in the right direction there. And last on this list, there are certain behaviors with extract and a few other things that manipulate the global symbol table that behave inconsistently, weirdly, or error out in really odd ways. So those rather perversions of the language have now been walled off and say, hey, you're not allowed to do this anymore. There's nothing that I know of in that list of edge case cleanup that would affect day-to-day usage. It's merely things that it's like, this is something you shouldn't be able to do with a language because it's going to yield indeterminate results basically no matter what. The link there at the end is to the PHP 7.1 upgrading guide, I believe. So you can take a look at additional features and constants, variables, and a backward compatibility break or two if you're doing something really weird that 7.1 provides you. With that, I am done with this presentation, and if you have any questions, please shout them out.
Thanks for joining us for another Nomad PHP Lightning Talk. If you'd like to give a Lightning Talk, please email me, joe@nomadphp.com. Please make sure you visit Joined In and leave Ian some feedback.